Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Injury Prone Podcast. This is Jorge Martin, familia. To my side, al mi lado, el hombre, el doctor, Dr. Edwin Porras. Bienvenido, mi amigo. How are we doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Down here in Southwest Florida, so sort of waiting for some of that rain to hit. It's going to be a little north of us, so everybody stay safe out there in the Panhandle. Other than that, I'm sitting here absorbing NFL news. Ready to talk, amigo. Let's go.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm just telling you, please don't try and match the hurricane we had last week. So don't do that. Just enjoy a little. Hopefully everything stays safe and everything, and you're okay, and it's just a bunch of rain. But mi amigo, well, first off, everybody, make sure you're subscribing to the Injury Prone Podcast on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We will be going in there and commenting. If you got any questions, drop them in there. But also make sure you're going in there. So everybody, I think we're both still reeling from the Jonathan Taylor news that we just heard. So he's on the PUP list, and now all of a sudden it's, fantasy managers are left, kind of like asking, what to do next. So he's missing 4 games. That's what we know, mi amigo. What are we doing with Jonathan Taylor? And is he still hurt? Could he still be hurt?
I'll start with what I know from my lens as a medical provider. We know that Jonathan Taylor had an ankle debridement. Just to clarify, Jonathan Taylor rolled his ankle. He had a normal, what you call the lateral ankle sprain, or what we call the low ankle sprain, to one of his ankles last year, the beginning of October, actually the same day Javonte Williams tore his ACL. So he rehabbed from that. We thought he came back. We thought he was fine. He missed a game, bounced back, re-injured the ankle, right? Then he was out. What happened next was that he had another ankle injury. So he had a high ankle sprain to the opposite side. So he's had 3 total ankle injuries, 2 to the same side. In the offseason, he had what's called a debridement. What they did is they opened him up. Very simple procedure. They go in, they clean some stuff up, they close them back up. No hardware involved. There's nothing additional that, from our knowledge, that we know that they did to Jonathan Taylor's ankle. 99.99999% of the time, that surgery is very straightforward. You go in, you get out. It has really good outcomes. It doesn't linger, right? So this isn't something that lingers. Now, is there maybe a 1% chance, 2% chance that this is still something that he's dealing with after the surgery? Yes. But the chances are very, 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 very low, which is to say, I'm not entirely certain that if Jonathan Taylor's injured, that it's because of this ankle injury. We know he had the back thing. Maybe that's what it is. But the PUP list was out of left field. It kind of came out of nowhere. It didn't really feel right. It doesn't feel like this is still something that the ankle, he should be suffering from an ankle issue from. And it feels like this would be, again, I'm trying to use more feel. It feels like that would be a bigger story if he was still having chronic ankle issues. It just doesn't seem to be that, the case. Now, we were talking before we hit record. You have a lot of Jonathan Taylor, so your wallet is reeling, compadre, and I'm sorry about that. I personally didn't draft any Jonathan Taylor, but it comes out in the wash because, during the Josh Jacobs thing, I just didn't get any Josh Jacobs, and that's on me. Maybe I should have. I just didn't love either value regardless, but I'm sure I'll pay for it in the end. But what do you do with Jonathan Taylor? Your guess is as good as mine. I guess we should go through the PUP rules. He's going to be on the reserve PUP. That means that Jonathan Taylor cannot, and the deadline was today at 4:30, Jonathan Taylor cannot play for the next 4 weeks of the regular season. The first time that he can be back will be in week 5. So basically you're going 4 weeks. If you drafted Jonathan Taylor, even if he does get moved or traded, which I don't necessarily even know the specifics of those rules, even if he gets moved, he cannot play until week 5. So you're kind of left holding the bag with Jonathan Taylor.
You know what? I think I'm going to change all of the team names that I have with Jonathan Taylor to Llorar. So, just get a little chente running on that one. So
you can always use a little chente. Vicente Fernandez, for the uninitiated, Vicente Fernandez is one of he is a troubadour, what do you call him? He's a mariachi, serenata, he serenades. He's got the most soulful love ballads and breakup ballads of all time. I think you can guess which kind Jorge wants to lean into right now. It's probably not the love ballad.
I want to break up with JT so bad right now, but vamos a ver. You never know. I mean, maybe I hit on somebody down on my down like my RB3 or something like that that can kind of help me limp along until week 5. So vamos a ver. But yeah, it's. Like you mentioned, avoiding Josh Jacobs. I mostly avoided Josh Jacobs because I thought I don't know. I just read it wrong. Read the tea leaves wrong. That's what happens. So maybe my 0 RB teams will save me. So we'll go there. But yeah, I mean, home league drafts are coming up. Could at what point does he fall far enough to be a value where you're taking him as your RB3, kind of like similar to Alvin Kamara?
I don't think he's worth it right now. I don't
Right.
see a reality to me personally where Jonathan Taylor is going to provide value to you at this point in drafts. I mean, I don't see it. Again, somebody could see it totally differently, maybe, but we've thought that we could predict this every step along the way, and we haven't, right? So at this point, it's like, what is even worth it? I mean, in the 3rd and 4th round, you can still get, it's that firewall of receivers, or you can pivot to tight end. You can even pivot to quarterback. There are still some quarterbacks that are high end. Lamar Jackson goes last time I checked in the 3rd or 4th round. I'm not
Yeah.
personally going to take Jonathan Taylor at this point. I maybe you have a different opinion, but that's me. I haven't been taking Jonathan Taylor. I told you before we hit record, I have 0 Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to probably have 0 Jonathan Taylor the rest of draft season.
Yeah, you got to figure I mean, he's got to almost fall to like the 6-7 range. That where you're not having to spend up to grab, you're not bypassing wide receiver early to start drafting running backs to get your RB3. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I think it's not gonna. People who draft Jonathan Taylor this weekend, Labor Day weekend, are gonna have to get lucky. I feel like that's muy duro, mi amigo. Well, let's talk about some other running backs. Let's go to Miles Sanders, dealing with a groin injury. So he says he wants to. I never trust the players when they say they want to play, that they want to play, but. And we talked about this before last week that these kind of injuries, we don't have like the hard data, but with this one, could there be enough time to get him healthy for week 1?
Yeah, I do think that there's enough time to get Miles Sanders back on the field. It's been, by the time week 1 hits, he's going to be, 3-4 weeks even removed from that injury, and I'm projecting for him to be ready by week 1. Could he miss week 1? I think there's like a 5-10% chance, but it seems like right now he's going to be ready.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Breece. So one of the things that we did not hear is, that he's 100% healthy. We didn't hear any health outcome. He's been practicing, but the fact that they signed Dalvin Cook, how much does that could you see some of that being they want to slow play and make sure that he's 100% healthy?
Yeah, I think this situation is being misread in some different contexts. I do think Dalvin Cook is not washed. I think there's plenty of data. If you hear somebody say Dalvin Cook's washed, it's probably not accurate. That's not a good representation of who Dalvin Cook is at this point. I still think he's a decent running back. I think he does provide some good value. Graham Barfield was pointing some of those stats, that data out to me, that Dalvin Cook's still a decent running back. So I think it was a matter of that. You also have to remember last year they were putting out pony packages, right? You had Michael Carter out there running alongside Breece Hall. This is a backfield. This is a coaching staff that likes to deploy 2 running backs, and that just sort of, it is what it is. With Breece Hall, it would make sense, because by the time week 1 hits, it would make sense that they want to bring him along slowly, because he is going to be about 9.5 months removed from the ACL surgery when week 1 hits. What you're probably going to see, and we've seen this pattern before. We've seen it in Saquon Barkley, right? We saw it a little bit in J.K. Dobbins before he sort of fell off the rails. You see these progressions where they do start off a little slower. And I understand if you want to get off to a hot start, Breece Hall isn't the guy that you probably want to go for. But what Breece Hall can do, and if you saw this quote from Aaron Rodgers, that essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, Aaron Rodgers came out and said he sees a very similar change or difference in the offense and how the offense runs when Breece Hall is out there. And he compared it to the way that the offense looks with and without Garrett Wilson. So he says Breece Hall gets into that next gear, and he says that he likes the way the offense looks with Breece Hall out there. Breece Hall had a pretty elite target per route run a number last year. We know that he can catch balls out of the backfield. He's not just a pass catching back, right? He can receive. He's a receiver as a running back. He does a good job in the passing game. Dalvin Cook isn't a slouch necessarily either, but it's not necessarily his game. But if we can treat Breece Hall, if you view Breece Hall right now as a guy who's going to slowly work his way into the offense, and you view him as like, honestly, I'm kind of viewing him as like a James White in James White heyday. James White finished as a top 12 running back at one point, right? I think if you view Breece Hall with that kind of juice, he's like a James White with some juice. And that's how I'm currently viewing him. I still think Breece Hall, even though it's not going to be in the beginning, early parts of the season, I'm viewing Breece Hall as a league winner in the back 8, 12 weeks of the NFL season.
And thinking about that, you mentioned that, getting work in the passing game could actually be beneficial to him because he's not going to the train wrecks at that point, hitting the line and then just getting, 8 defenders hitting him. Getting out there, all he's got to do is maybe beat a linebacker or a DB. That might make things a little bit easier for him. I could see that James White usage. So, yeah. And his ADP is falling a little bit to the point where people who may have been have a little trepidation before, maybe now they don't have to, right?
Yeah, I don't think you should worry too much. Here's the thing. Breece Hall is still going in some of the leagues that we're in. We're in a draft together right now, and James Coe ended up taking him at the end of the 3rd. It just didn't match up to where, there was too much value there, injury or not injury, when Breece would have landed to me. I very much would have taken him if he would have made his way back around, but he just didn't. He went at the end of the 3rd, which I think was a solid pickup by James. We were joking with him that he's got high T because he took Saquon Barkley and Breece Hall. But that's another story for another day. But no, I really like Breece Hall still in the end of the 3rd, to the mid 4th. I think Breece can be a really solid, selection for a lot of different teams. I think it's a little risky to say that he's an anchor, but I would probably do it in the right situation, the right scenario. If things fall, I would use Breece Hall as an anchor.
Ooh, I want a little bit more. I want Eckler. I want Bijan. I want Saquon. Obviously CMC. I want one of those guys to be my anchor. I'd want Breece to be one of 2 guys.
Understandable.
I probably would not go anchor RB with him. I'd want to, maybe get a Ramondre in there or something like that. Someone in there. So, okay. Eso me gusta. We're a little bit more aligned now. I think we were in different areas on that, on different area codes before. All right, let's go over to the wide receivers. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So, we did an update from him last week. There's, you got some new intel.
Yeah, so Jaxon Smith-Njigba, we talked about last week, that he could be ready by week 1. I still do think that he could be. He wasn't placed on the PUP, which is really, really good news. Maybe, Pete Carroll wasn't lying to us. Of course, that doesn't mean that he has to come back immediately in week 2 or week 3, but he's got a chance. That's what I'm projecting for him right now, is that week 2 or week 3 return. And yeah, man, I look forward to seeing him. I don't think he's going to miss that much time. It sounds like it was a relatively minor injury, and so I'm excited. I'm still taking Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the 5th, 6th round ish. I think if he's fallen there, I'm happy with that. So I'm okay with that.
So I got a question. One of the things I think about players who get leg injuries compared to upper body injuries. Is it easier for them to maintain their conditioning if their legs are fine? And like in this, it's a wrist injury where he could still do running and different types of things.
Yeah, 100%. That's a really good question. And that's exactly what we tend to do with our guys too. If it's an upper body injury, you go, you run bases, you continue to do your sprint work, you continue to lift as best as you can. You do basically everything. I mean, he could be running routes, right? Against defenders. Obviously, it's going to be minimal contact there. He can continue to do everything. He can obviously still go to meetings. He can do certain things on the side with the athletic trainers that will keep his legs going and moving. This is going to be a very minor bump in the road for Jason.
Okay. Well, one guy who got hurt since our first YouTube episode was JEUDY. So hamstring. I got to tell you, the timing doesn't look good having it happen when it did. what are you what's kind of your assessment?
Yeah, so you have different timelines, and I know people were nervous about Jared Judy getting carted off, and it did look like it was a painful injury. But every injury is painful. I wouldn't read too much about him going into the cart. They're obviously in camp, and so they need to put the guys on the cart to take them to the athletic training room. With that said, like I said, Jerry Judy obviously looked like he was in pain. It was non-contact, and it could very easily be a situation where it's a pretty significant hamstring injury. But when we think about significant hamstring injuries, and we look at the time frames, since 2018. This is in my book, by the way, the injury prone draft guide and playbook. Since 2018, wide receivers who average at least 10 points per game on a PPR basis and suffer a hamstring strain, less than 5% lose more than 3 weeks of time. In other words, if they're going to miss a month of time, that's less than that. That's 5% of the sample. So big losses like that, or big losses of time, aren't necessarily common. Now, even if we say Jerry Judy is going to miss a significant amount of time for this hamstring strain, let's say that it is a hamstring strain similar to like what Jerome Ford, was dealing with. This hamstring strain that happened for Jerry Judy last week still allows him, I think it's like 2.5 weeks before week 1 hits, right? So let's say he's by the time week 1 hits, it'll be 3 weeks. And then week 1 will pass and it'll be week 2 and it will have been 4 weeks. Maybe he misses week 2 and he comes back in week 3. That's what I'm currently projecting for Jerry Judy, is for him to come back around that week 2 or 3 range. Obviously, it's a good sign they didn't put him on the pup or something like that. We don't assume that this is like a really, really big issue that's going to cause like an Austin Eckler type injury. We can't say this is going to be an Austin Eckler type injury. And if you listen to Adam Schefter on his own podcast, he talked about Jerry Judy as well. He projects Jerry Judy to be back around that week 2 to 3 time frame as well.
Okay.
And so I think we're looking at a week 2 or 3 return for Jerry Judy, at worst a week 4 return for Jerry Judy.
Yeah. Now, people might say because he's suffered injuries in each of the last 3 years that Jerry Judy might be injury prone. I'm going to give you the floor to maybe refute that, because it seems like different body parts have been hurt with him.
I think my answer might surprise you. For example, John Hansen has basically said, I'm going to lower Jerry Judy in our projections because the dude has always has something. And really, I don't have a great argument against that, because he did have the high ankle sprain that was severe. It looked bad, and it was bad, right? And then he turned around and he had the sort of, it was one of the most bizarre injuries I'd seen from a non-contact perspective. It looked like he strained one of the muscles in the back of his ankle. Kind of a strange injury. He bounced back from that, but that was also non-contact. Now he's got the hamstring strain that's non-contact. In addition to, if you watch Jerry Judy, and again, I don't dive into these waters very often because I don't really think that it is actionable for us, but he does have some wonky mechanics, right? He's got some sort of loosey-goosey joints. It looks like he runs a little, he cuts weird. He runs weird. He's got like this whip that every time he turns, and he sort of, what's called valgus. He sort of dips his knees inward every time he makes a cut. It just looks kind of wonky. Again, that is not a 1-to-1. I'm not saying that predicts injury, but it does make you kind of wonder, okay, he's got 3 major lower body injuries at this point. At what point is that coming from the top down, from his hip strength, from his hip mobility, his knee strength, his ankle mobility? Is there something there with Jerry Judy where he's always going to kind of be banged up? Now, again, I'm very careful to go and tread into these waters. But I will say, like, if you feel like, all right, I've seen enough from him at this point, I would understand it. I think that I'm going to give him maybe one more try here, one more pass. I'll let him burn me one more time, but I'm still going to be drafting Judy probably a little lower than where he's going now. I'd be okay with Jerry Judy in the 5th, 6th round. But again, I think that some yellow flags have emerged at this point.
Yeah, just like that Hamilton song, One Last Time. So we'll just one last time. Es la última vez. So
last time I gave somebody a last time, it was Will Fuller, and he never returned to the league, Jorge. So hopefully this is not the same thing. I went on a podcast and I specifically said, I'm going to give Will Fuller one more shot. This is the last ride. And then I never saw him again.
Well, he still hasn't taken the shot, so maybe you're fine. So we'll look at that. Okay, another pass catcher, Terry McLaurin, had the toe injury. We talked about him on last week's show. So you know, as we talked about, these can linger, but is there reason for optimism for him to be ready early in the season?
Yeah, I think that Terry McLaurin can be ready early in the season. Now, it's really going to depend. I don't know to what extent that injury is, obviously. So I sent an update out in the injury prone draft
Mhm.
guide and playbook. This was a couple days ago, and I'm just going to read off what I said about Terry McLaurin in that specific update that the customers from the injury prone draft guide got. I said, since 2018, wide receivers with McLaurin's profile missed an average and a median of 3 weeks due to turf toe injuries. The league-wide median is 4 weeks. Additionally, Adam Schefter's language in the report on Twitter still implies this injury could have been worse. Based on historical precedents, McLaurin has a good chance for week 1. Great to excellent chances for week 2. Low probabilities this extends into week 3 or beyond, though not out of the question. So in other words, I really do think that we're looking similar to Jerry Jeudy. We're looking at a week 2 or 3 return for Terry McLaurin, or week 1. Like, I think this is in the opposite direction of the Jerry Jeudy situation, where there is some optimism. It's difficult to grade these turf toe injuries clinically. You can there's like a grade 2 is on this massive spectrum that bleeds into a grade 3 and bleeds into a grade 1. Like, turf toe is just kind of a nasty injury. And so it's really going to depend on how he's moving and how he's showing up. But make sure if you buy the draft guide, you'll continue to get updates. And if you follow and subscribe to the Injury Prone Fantasy Football Podcast, then you will get these updates as soon as they are out.
Make sure. Hey, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, familia, everybody. Vámonos todos, mi gente, nuestra gente. Get in there. We're gonna help you. All right. Looking at the next guy. We're still in the pass catchers here. KADARIUS TONEY. So there's talk about him returning to practice. He, like you mentioned with Jerry Jeudy, it always seems like there's something with him, but people want to get a piece of that Kansas City offense. Could he be a piece that people have to look for at the end of drafts?
Yeah, I think Toney is one of those. Scott Barrett would tell you he's a league winner. I don't know if I honestly would take it that far at this point. Matt Harmon's not a big fan of KADARIUS TONEY. Like, I get it. The big play, the big plays entice you, or you can see it happening. But I just think he's kind of a gimmicky guy. This is, of course, my football opinion, not my medical opinion. Most guys after this meniscus issue that he's having can return within that 7 to 8 week range, and he's going to be right around there once week 1 rolls around. It's good news they didn't put him on the pup. The deadline is passed, so they didn't put him on the pup. They're probably expecting him back in the next couple of weeks. So week 1 is definitely on the table. Here's what you need to know, though. Jerry Jeudy has had 2 separate surgeries on the same knee for the same issue. I don't believe in injury prone. Like, we've had this conversation, but I do look at injury histories. Injury histories matter. And when you look at these injury histories for these meniscus tears, you don't have a performance dip, but you can have a recurrence. And so there is that, that chance to have a recurrence with KADARIUS TONEY. But to bring it full circle, I think he's like a middle ground, moderate hit, and he's miss small, right? Hit moderately good, big, and miss small. His ADP is so low anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So if you want to take a shot on KADARIUS TONEY, go for it. He might miss more games. At this point, I think I'd set the line, for how many games that he plays at 9.5 or something like that, because of the specific meniscus issue. But if you want to take a shot on KADARIUS TONEY, he could be back by week 1. I'm pretty neutral about it, honestly.
Yeah, the thing with him, and he's going low enough in drafts. I'm actually looking up his underdog draft average draft is his ranking and his average draft position right now. And I mean, I feel like he's going late enough that it's a flyer. Some people who are a little local might even take, Michael Thomas at that point. But so let's see. Let me look real quick. I'm looking. It's coming up.
I want to talk about Michael Thomas too once you find that ADP.
So he's 103. So 103.6, right behind the guy we're going to talk about next, who's Treylon Burks. So only 2 slots behind Burks. It's at that point, that's you're talking about the 9th, 10th round. Looking at, you've already got, you're in your reserve roster. Maybe he's worth a shot.
Yeah, I do think so. So there was this piece that came out. I'm sorry, you said you cut out for a little bit. Michael Thomas, right?
Yes.
Okay. So again, we won't spend a lot of time on this. We're pressed for time already. Michael Thomas, a piece came out. Basically, his body rejected the hardware that was placed in his ankle 2 times. That is not his fault. That really is that was the crux of what was happening with Michael Thomas. That's bad luck. You don't see that very often. He made it until 28 years old without any injury issues. You know, is he going to be the same guy? I don't know. Do you need him to be? Probably not. But like you said, if you're drafting him, a guy that you're going to, is going to maybe fill your bench at this point or be your 3rd, 4th wide receiver, I'm more than happy to take a shot on Michael Thomas, because I do think that hardware situation is very unlucky, super unlucky, and I shouldn't necessarily be a problem now.
I love that, because that's something I have not heard, and it's something that I've asked a beat writer about it, and yeah, that's fantastic intel right there, because I look at Michael Thomas. He's a guy I drafted just on a deep bench the other day, and just taking the flyer. And that's what it is. He's far enough down in ADP that it could be something that he's not. You're not making a big investment. So let's jump into Treylon Burks. I just talked about him. He's going at the 101 and back at practice now. So how encouraging is that, coming off the knee injury with the season coming up?
No, yeah, it's definitely encouraging. It's definitely encouraging. I think that he does have a chance to be back by week 1. These LCL injuries are kind of weird, to be honest. They're not very common. Like I mentioned before, you saw this in Darren Waller with the LCL IT band diagnosis a couple of years ago in 2021. So for a guy dealing with this stuff, like I do think that it's, you have to take it relatively seriously, right? You have to understand that we don't know for a fact exactly what's going on. They call it an LCL, but could it be a medial, meniscus? Yes, it could be a medial meniscus. There could be some meniscal involvement. It's just kind of like I said, a strange situation. But specifically when it comes to him being back on the practice field, that is really, really good news. We obviously want our guys out on the field. We want them pushing themselves. And if I could find my update where I talked about Burks, then I would let you know exactly what I said, because it is also in the injury prone draft guide and playbook. And of course, I cannot find it, but I can tell you that I have relative confidence that Burks can actually be back by week 1. I think week 2, at worst is what we're looking at with Treylon Burks, because it was something that they told us would be, that we've seen be 2 to 4 weeks. And so I'm in 2 to 4 weeks from when the injury is. So I'm crossing my fingers, somewhat confident that he'll be back by week 1. I think at worst week 2.
Okay. I like that. I like that. And you know what? Treylon Burks could be someone who becomes a bit of a kind of like a little bit on sale, because the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is going to get the top defenders on the other side. And so Burks could be in there with Chig Okonkwo as far as getting some targets, fighting for targets as the number 2 pass catcher on the team. So maybe he works his way. Maybe he takes a few weeks to kind of get back into it. Let's get into Jaylen Waddle. A lot of people drafted him in the 2nd round. Best ball drafts, already early drafts. Still feeling confident that it's an ab injury. Those I know can be problematic.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I don't know what this is, but it doesn't seem like it's that serious. It seems like, at least based on what McDaniel said, that it wasn't a very serious injury. They weren't worried about getting him reps, that he'd gotten enough reps that they felt comfortable. But based on when the injury happened and based on the situation that we know, I'm not concerned about Jaylen Waddle. He should be out there by week 1.
Oh, okay. All right, let's close up. Mike Evans missed the last preseason game, which was going to be the only opportunity he was going to play with Baker Mayfield, and so which could be important. Could have been important for getting some camaraderie there, get more of a connection. Groin injury at this late stage, is it worrisome?
So we saw that this was an issue a few days ago. It could bleed into week 1. I'm not necessarily certain that it will. We don't know if this was tightness. We don't know if this was a true strain. He is 30 years old, so it's something to consider. I would right now say cautiously say Mike Evans is back by week 1. I think continue to again, subscribe to the pod, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter at FBInjuryDoc, at Jorge Martin 17. But yeah, I don't think that this is going to be a massive issue for Mike Evans, and they're probably just holding him out. And the last thing, let me circle back on Treylon Burks. So this is, the LCL thing is something that like I said, is probably somewhere around a 2 to 4 week mark. And this happened to Burks on August 16th. And so in theory, he should be ready by week 1. Like I said, I think at worst, Treylon Burks is back by week 2.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. So, and getting back to Evans, we'll just kind of keep an eye on him, keep an eye on the practice reports to make sure that he's actually out there on the field, because yeah, I mean, we see these things sometimes just because, as you mentioned, there's so much nuance to injuries, and no two people have the same injury to the same degree or the same healing powers. So it's definitely important to keep an eye on the injury reports. Okay. So, mi amigo, I've heard some of the shows that you had before we took this on YouTube with people like Rich Rebar and those folks, and you asked them about a rant. I te pido permiso if I could offer up a rant of my own that hopefully will help the fantasy community. It's somewhat fantasy related, but it's fantasy analysts who say players suck. That to me is a real big pet peeve, and it really annoys me because the fact that, I mean, you see how hard people work just to play in the minor leagues, how good they have to be in the minor leagues and have a shot at the show. To me, if you're the 53rd guy on a roster, you've got a skill set that they want. And there's not a chance in hell that I want to hear that they suck. Maybe they had a bad play. Maybe they got beat badly. I mean, heck, I've seen 2 Hall of Famers go up against each other, Bruce Smith and Anthony Munoz. Bruce Smith was eating Anthony Munoz's lunch for one day, and that's considered one of the greatest of all time. Fellow Mexican, by the way. But you're nodding your head. I have a feeling. We're singing the same song.
Absolutely,
I think la misma cumbia.
Yeah, la misma cumbia, norteña, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, the fact that people will say like, "Oh, this player sucks, that player sucks," is the worst player on an NFL roster is better at their job than we will ever be at ours. I think that's pretty quantifiable. And so I'm with you, man. Like that's the same thing as when people tag players and say they suck or, this or that. And we understand, like, it's understood that you mean relative to other players at the same position, given the same skill set. Like we get it, but I don't like to say that either. I'm typically pro player in a lot of aspects, just because what I do lends itself to be, I root for these guys, right? Like I want them to be successful. So I'm with you on that one. I think that's a good rant. I think that the rant is solidified. Do not tell players in the NFL that are professionals that they suck.
In any sport. I mean, mine comes from also the baseball side, because I saw guys, really work their asses off to get to the big leagues and to try and stay in the big leagues. And I've seen guys get that call where they're like being released and stuff like that, and you still know that they're still phenomenal at that game. Rant over. I feel much better. Me siento mucho más mejor, mi amigo.
Perfect.
All right, so. I think we're gonna have one more show before the season starts, and this will be after practice reports come out. So let's close up shop, amigo. What can people expect now that they've got their drafts? Obviously, follow you on Twitter at FBInjuryDoc to keep an eye on that.
Nope, same as last time. I mean, follow me on Twitter and make sure you're looking into the injury prone draft guide and playbook. A lot of people have asked me whether this will help with season-long leagues, and it will, right? This isn't just a draft guide. You get the tiers, you get the rankings, you get the player profiles and the projections, but you also get data that's available to help you make decisions week to week. If you want to know how running backs perform after a high ankle sprain in their first week back, boom, open the book up to whatever page it is, look at it. If you want to know how wide receivers perform after, or you want to know what the recurrence rate is for wide receivers after their hamstring strain in their first week back, boom, turn the page to that page. You can see the recurrence rate. This is all data based from 2018 and on. So this is, all the data that you could possibly want to help you make DFS decisions, to help you make, lineup decisions, start sit decisions. All of that is going to be there to help guide you along the way, help you make decisions. The injury prone, that's why it's called the draft guide and season long playbook, because it will help you in your season long leagues and in DFS as well. So make sure you check that out. Use injury prone 25% off for now. I know your drafts are coming up. If you're on the fence, I've got nothing but positive feedback. Obviously, the negative feedback probably they keep it to themselves, but I've gotten a ton of positive feedback from it. So really excited to continue to push that along the way this preseason.
The negative feedback is coming from people who are going to get fantasy punishments. They're going to be like on the, holding a sign that says, I suck at fantasy football, or they have to put a license plate frame. So those are the people. So no, it's a quick read. It's so informational, packed with great, not only great information, but it's also digestible information. Edwin does not talk down to you. It makes everything explainable, and I can't tell you how important that is for us normal folks, us mere mortals. So, oh man, all right. So everybody, muchas gracias, everybody. Muchas gracias otra vez. Edwin, any last words?
Saludos, mi amigo. Hey, let's do Mexican candy of the week. This is a very off the top of my head. My Mexican candy of the week are duvalines, the strawberry and vanilla kind. What's yours?
Oh, I love those. I love those. Oh,
are we
man.
joint? Is that going to be the joint one?
I think
we
so.
don't have
I
to
think
do joint.
so.
Okay.
I mean, well, I'm always going to be, I think I told you last time, mazapan is my classic, but
big
that
mazapan
one,
guy too.
that one, oh yeah. The one thing, you can't wear anything like what you're wearing right now would not be recommended for eating mazapan.
Right. Correct. You can't do it.
Yeah, that and beignets in New Orleans. Yeah, you don't want to you don't want to be wearing anything black on those. So yeah. Oh God, you reminded me of that. Oh, I'm gonna have to go ask my mom if she's got any at home.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get out of here. Muchas gracias, everybody. Muchas gracias. Adios.